Did you know that I listen to an average of 10 hours of podcasts every single week for personal development and growth? Because remember, at the end of the day, we're all lifelong learners. We need to learn as much information as possible, actionable ideally, that we can then use to make a better impact and bigger impact on the world. And there's many things I got from podcasts that not only apply to my own personal life, but also communication in general. That's why in this week's episode, I'm sharing you my top 3 podcasts and the ins and outs on how to master them. Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. Brendan from MasterTalk here, your go-to channel to mastering your talk. And today we're covering the art of podcasts and how you should go about picking your favorites and then sharing my own as well. So let's get into it. So the system that I want you to think about with podcasts, especially interviewer-led podcasts where someone is interviewing someone else, don't pay attention to the guests that come on. I want you to pay attention to the person who's giving the interview for 2 reasons. One is because they are the enabler. They're the person who's deriving the best possible conversation out of this time, whether it's an hour or 2 hours. And 2, remember that in interviewer-style podcasts, the person who's giving the interview is essentially introducing you, the audience, to the best people in their network. So let's say I had a podcast and I had 500 friends and I was doing one podcast episode every single week. Naturally, I would invite the people I already know to join the podcast. But I wouldn't just pick anybody. I would pick the top 50 or 100 people in my network to come every week for the show. So in that same way, if you don't respect and admire the person who's doing the interviews, then my advice is you shouldn't listen to the podcast on a long-term basis because they won't introduce you to the right people that fulfill the vision you want. And that's why the 3 podcasts I'm going to be recommending to you both appeal to the mission that I have, which is to grow MasterTalk and bring communication to the world and make a bigger impact. So let's get into those. Number 1, Lewis Howes' School of Greatness. I've been following Lewis for many years now, probably 5 or 6 years, and I really love his show, which are long-form interview-style podcasts where he interviews people all the way from Olympians to athletes to businessmen to psychologists to lawyers. The list really goes on, and it's a very well-rounded podcast. But the thing I love about the most, essentially, from Lewis is not only that he's impact-driven and he's value-driven, he cares about making an impact in the world, but he's also a phenomenal interviewer. Grant Cardone is a good example of this. Whenever Grant Cardone, who's like this real estate mogul, goes on shows or different interview styles, he's very, high level, talks about, buy real estate, do all this stuff. When he interviews with Lewis, though, you notice how it's very different because Lewis asks more questions about how he's doing, what emotions he's going through, what are the challenges that nobody's willing to ask. And one of the episodes that Lewis interviewed him, actually, Grant started crying for 10 minutes, which is unheard of. The great Grant Cardone is tearing up on camera. And that's how powerful Lewis is as an interviewer, because he takes your soul, essentially, and brings it out for display. I think that's a good way of summarizing that. So in that same way, for all the hundreds of episodes I've watched of Lewis's show, for every single person he's introduced us, the audience, from his network, I learned so much about relationships, health, wealth, and everything that helped me shape the person I am today, as well as many podcasts, but this is a great example, so I highly recommend you check it out. Number 2, Tom Bilyeu's Impact Theory. So Tom's a very interesting character. He's the founder of Quest Nutrition, which is a $1 billion company that he sold. It's a nutritional products where they sold bars and granola bars and different products to make people healthier. And with the money he had made, he's now trying to, what he defines it as, breaking the matrix, to try and make the maximum amount of people around the world develop a growth mindset, which is a mindset of doers and shakers, and no matter what happens, we can achieve anything we want. So he's trying to develop that mindset in everyone in the world. And through his podcast, Impact Theory, he brings the smartest minds from across the world to talk about how they did the impossible. So a lot of his guests are extremely impossible to get in touch with in person that pretty much Tom only has access to. So it's a very interesting podcast in the sense that you can learn a lot from the best and the brightest without ever talking to them. So some examples of guests he's brought on, because he's on the board of X Prize, which is this big sum of money that is given to cutting-edge technological innovation prizes. He pretty much brings the entire board of X Prize for different episodes. So Peter Diamandis is a very good example. So he's super impressive. Ray Kurzweil as well, and many different technologists around the world. And people from it's just amazing, basically. And he brings all of these super smart people. And the other thing I like about Tom is the way he introduces his guests. You can tell, even if he has so much money and all this stuff, he cares a lot about his audience and deriving the maximum juice of information in the minimum amount of time. So whenever he introduces a guest, he doesn't say, like Lewis, for example, has been on the show. He doesn't just go, oh, this is Lewis, he does this. He actually expands a lot more on pretty much his whole life story in 60 seconds. So I probably think that he spends just a day writing introductions for his guests. Like, it's insane how powerful he is. Another example I'll give you is Gary Vaynerchuk, which I'm sure many of you know. So Gary Vee is the guy who's like an entrepreneur. He's the founder of VaynerMedia, and he's a pretty big influencer in the space. And even Gary was shocked when he interviewed with Tom and realized how well researched he was. That he did his homework, that he was shocked. And it's probably the best interview I've seen of Gary Vee and out across all shows and all platforms. So I highly recommend you check out Impact Theory. Number 3, read Hoffman's Masters of Scale. There's one reason and one reason only that I recommend Reid Hoffman's podcast, and that's because I find it insane that someone at his level of expertise and success is sharing all of this information out that nobody else can. So I'll give you an example. He literally brings on all of the other billionaire entrepreneurs and founders that he grew up with and building his own business. Because he used to work at PayPal and he was the founder of LinkedIn. So for everyone else that he worked at, Peter Thiel, the founder of PayPal, Elon Musk, pretty much everyone except for I think Elon, has been on the show and explained in excruciating detail how they all built their own companies. So this is an individual who didn't have to do this, who pretty much has access to everyone else, and they would only come on the show because it's Reid Hoffman, right? And because of that level of access, the thing that shocked me the most is, why is this free? Like, that's how value add this person is. So I highly recommend you check out that episode or that series of podcasts, because I learned a lot from Masters of Scale, and it's helped me a lot think about MasterTalk and how to grow the channel as well. And he's very varied. He doesn't just bring tech entrepreneurs. He brings all sorts of people. From Will.i.am came on recently. He brings on such a wide array of individuals that you can learn so much from them. And the mastering and editing that's done for the podcast feels more like a story rather than just a conversation, so I highly recommend you check that out. Before I conclude the video, though, I want to tell you what all 3 of these podcasts have in common back to the decisions that I make. Because remember, I only listen to 3 podcasts. I don't listen to that many. But I listen to the podcasts I choose very, very focused. So I listen to hundreds of the same podcast from the same person. And the reason I do that is because all 3 of these people have 2 things in common. One is they're all very impact driven. So they care about making an impact. They build new technologies. They're very optimistic about the future. So that's the type of people I want to be surrounded by and that I want to learn from. So they're going to introduce me to people I don't know. And obviously I've learned from hundreds of people I didn't know until I listened to the episodes of the podcast. The second reason is that they all bring nonprofit founders onto their podcasts. So whether it's the founder of Charity Water that I respect a lot, Scott Harrison, he's been on the show for all 3 of those shows. So whether it's Impact Theory, Masters of Scale, School of Greatness, he's been on all of them. And that's also true for other nonprofit founders like Nancy Lublin, who's been on Masters of Scale. So what I like about that, there's a business side to it and a philanthropic side to it. So there's a mix of both, and they give you the best access to all types of information. So I have a huge respect and admiration for all of these shows, so I recommend you check them out. As always, if you enjoyed this week's special episode of Master Talk, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well to see more videos like this. The biggest thing about podcasts that I want you to take away, especially in terms of communication, is that it allows you to listen better. Because since these conversations are conversations that have happened in the past, you're forced to listen and forced to take notes. And that's why I believe I've been able to sharpen my listening skills over years of listening to podcasts. So by listening to podcasts, not only will you get smarter, but you'll be able to master your talk as well. Take care and have an awesome week, everyone. Cheers.